Now, unfortunately, Netflix, they haven't been adding a lot of good new release movies lately, at least not big movies that were released in theaters. They just stopped coming to Netflix. But in this video, we're going to talk about a bunch of the best new releases on Netflix. Many of these Netflix originals that were largely overlooked. As usual, we've got some action flicks in the mix, including a very recent release that I thought was like the Mexican version of Tears of the Sun. An amazing World War II spy movie. We've got a big budget movie from India, and a couple family-friendly things mixed in here as well. And yes, all of these are movies that have been released within the last year, in most cases within the last 6 months. Thanks to Beam for sponsoring this video. Let's get started with one of those action flicks that was just recently released, Exterritorial. Now, this is from Germany, but as usual, they've got a good dubbed version. Like, if you do not like reading subtitles, the dubbing on this one is more than good enough. But in this movie, you follow a mother who loses track of her son in a U.S. consulate building and then begins to suspect that he's actually been kidnapped. Now, she's not just any mother, she's actually a highly trained soldier, but even though this movie features a fairly small woman throwing around very large men, it somehow still feels pretty grounded. She's typically only taking on one at a time. She's not John Wick or Atomic Blonde in this movie. If anything, the movie's got a bit of a die-hard feel at times. She's mostly hiding out, trying to figure out what happened to her son. So with this movie, it's not just all action. It's actually got almost like a convoluted mystery plot that takes quite a while to unveil, but all of that stuff I found to be pretty interesting. More interesting than the fight sequences, which again felt more grounded than movies like this tend to feel. Now, if you've never watched any movies from India, they do things different over there. They make these big, huge productions that are a lot of fun to watch, and some of them kind of feel like 80s and 90s action flicks we used to get here in the US. The type of movies we don't really see that often anymore. They're making them in spades over in India, and one I watched recently is titled Fighter. This is actually about fighter pilots, and the movie features a bunch of awesome dogfights and stuff like that. Now, this is not Top Gun Maverick. That movie is kind of one of a kind in the way that they shot it. Most of what you're seeing here is CGI, and it's a long movie. It's like well over 2 hours and has a lot of characters in it, and they're pretty well fleshed out. But like I said, it's got that 80s and 90s feel. Like, the villain in this movie is a bit over the top and kind of mustache twisty, but I like that. Like, it's got a good vibe to it, and the movie's got kind of a surprisingly positive vibe as well. There are some cultural things that don't quite translate over. For instance, the call sign of the main hero in the movie is Patty. It's basically his name shortened, which is fine, but like Patty here in the US has just different connotations. But literally, like, aside from some of that stuff, this movie's just a total blast. Even the sequences where they're not in fighter jets, they're lively and fun and interesting. I would say fans of Top Gun, you may be surprised how much you could get into this movie, and unusually, it's got a very good dubbed version. I've had to watch a bunch of movies from India that are unfortunately like dubbed in one of the other Indian languages, which is like the worst way to watch a movie. Their mouths don't match up, and you're still having to read subtitles. It's kind of wild. Not the case with Fighter, making it one of the more accessible Indian flicks on Netflix. I'll say, if you've not gotten into these yet, Fighter may be a good place to start, but there's still really like no messing with RRR. Easily one of the greatest movies to have come out of that country in recent years. It's actually still on Netflix. They also have a documentary behind the scenes that's pretty incredible for RRR as well. It's just not a new release, so it has no place here on this list. So let's move on to a French flick that stars legendary actor Vincent Cassel in Banger. Now, I wish I could tell you that the movie itself is a banger. Not quite, but I actually was surprised how much I got into this movie. It actually starts off fairly slow, but As it builds up, there were some fantastic sequences in this flick, and what you get is Vincent Cassel playing kind of a washed-up DJ who's really full of himself. He's kind of an egomaniac, and I think he had a lot of fun with this character. He's actually recruited by law enforcement to go undercover and try to get some intel on this organized crime family. But to do so, he's got to become friends with a rival DJ that he absolutely hates. If he pulls it off, though, he'll remove that guy off the stage, kind of clearing the path for his comeback. So Banger actually has a very interesting setup, and then there are some just great undercover sequences where he's about to get found out, or, things you've seen in movies like Donnie Brasco or The Departed. That's in this movie, but it's also pretty funny. Now, they do have a dubbed version, but I found it to be very distracting to hear an English-sounding voice coming out of Vincent Cassel's face. And for the record, I typically preview these movies in both, so that way I can hear what the dubbed version sounds like, as well as the original. And there are several on this list. Banger, it's got the worst dubbing out of any of them on this list. It's not terrible, but I found it to be too distracting, whereas most of the other foreign flicks on this list have exceptional dubbing. So conclusion on Banger, not one I recommend for everyone, but if you're a fan of Vincent Cassel at all, it's a great one to watch. My next pick might surprise some of you, but it's definitely the biggest budget movie on this list, at least out of the ones that came out in theaters, and that's Bad Boys: Ride or Die. Now, I was pleasantly surprised with this fourth installment in the Bad Boys series. I thought it was miles better than the third one that came out years back. That movie had some touches that I enjoyed, but I felt like the tone was all off with it. This one feels like a Bad Boys movie. In fact, the director here is essentially channeling Michael Bay, and I think it worked. It feels like it belongs with the first two movies, which are just absolute, knockdown, drag-out, fun action movies in almost every way imaginable. I mean, Michael Bay almost invented that excessive genre of action, or at least the style that he developed with those movies is present in this fourth installment. And I gotta say, Martin Lawrence has still got it. He is still funny as hell. I was actually surprised how funny he was in the movie. I don't know why, he always is, but you would think he'd be showing signs of aging at this point. Bottom line on this one, it's just a fun action movie that feels the way a Bad Boys movie should, which I honestly was not expecting at this point. Next up, we've got what was probably the biggest movie that they released right at the end of 2024. And even though it's admittedly a derivative thriller, it feels like something I've seen a bunch of times before, I still thoroughly enjoyed Carry On. Now, I am a fan of Taron Egerton. I feel like he's been great in stuff over the years, and he's just a good leading man. Nothing too spectacular, but Jason Bateman as the bad guy in this movie, no, that's not a spoiler. You find that out very early on in the flick. I thought he was great. He's just much more versatile than I think people give him credit for. And Carry On's got some far-fetched elements in it, but that's not a bad thing with a movie like this. Honestly, this is the type of movie that probably would have killed in theaters in the late 90s, early 2000s. And for whatever reason, the way kind of the industry has changed, you just don't get thrillers like this in major theatrical releases anymore. They've kind of found their home on streaming services. That said, Carry On's one of the better thrillers like this, big budget, PG-13 thriller type things that Netflix has put out, I think, all year. Coming up next, we've got Last Bullet. That's Lost Bullet 3, the finale of the Lost Bullet trilogy. But before that, I do want to tell you about how today's sponsor, Dream by Beam, has been helping me get solid sleep lately. And that's because Dream is a luxurious drink mixture loaded with the best sleep-promoting ingredients. It's a powder that you mix with a bit of warm milk or water about 30 minutes to an hour before bed. I will often have mine about halfway through my last movie of the day. Dream has been shown to help you fall asleep faster, stay asleep, and most importantly, wake up feeling refreshed. There's no point in taking a sleep aid that's gonna make you feel groggy when you wake up in the morning. It defeats the purpose of a good night of sleep. And I'm not someone who typically has sleep problems, but if I need a good night of solid sleep, I will take Dream before bed. If maybe I didn't get good sleep the night before for a variety of reasons, when I take take Dream, I find that I fall asleep very comfortably. I don't wake up in the middle of the night, and I will often wake up before the alarm even goes off, feeling great. Dream's available in a CBD version and a non-CBD version. I have been taking the non-CBD version, but it also comes available in a bunch of different flavors. The original being sort of a cinnamon cocoa flavor that's, like I said, luxurious. It's a very nice little treat before bed. But they just sent me this new cherry berry flavor. I only just tried it last night, and it was a lovely little treat before bed. And I had the best night of sleep I've had all week. It's also gluten-free, dairy-free with no GMOs, no added sugars, and no artificial flavors. So get the sleep you deserve and get up to 35% off when you follow my link in the video description, or just go to shopbeam.com/flick. Again, that's 35% off, something that's gonna help you get better sleep. I highly recommend it, but speaking of things I highly recommend, let's get to the top picks on this list. Now, I've been a big fan of the Last Bullet movies. The first one is really one of my favorite Netflix original action movies. I cannot recommend it enough. It's got real stunts, some raw fight choreography. It's bloody, it's brutal, car crashes, cars are on fire, and again, all of it's real. Like, this movie was made the way action movies used to be made, which is why I love it. It's like the only reason I love it. They went a little bit too over the top for my taste in Lost Bullet 2, but Last Bullet I thought was a great conclusion. Now, the storytelling's not really as solid as the first one, and in fact, the story gets a little bit too complicated and convoluted, but they come in hard with the stunts in this one. There are some that aren't amazing looking in the trailer that just, when you watch them, you can tell everything's real. When the whole sequence is cut together, it makes for just like a throwback style action movie that, again, we don't get enough of anymore. Yes, the John Wick movies do a lot of real stunts, but seeing one done at a lower budget level like this, man, we need more movies like this. Now, I mentioned I've got some family-friendly movies on this list, but that doesn't mean they're movies exclusively for kids and families. My next pick is a nature documentary from the same creators as My Octopus Teacher. Easily like one of the most incredible nature documentaries I've seen in recent years, and their newest film is titled Pangolin, Kulu's Journey. Now, I went into this not knowing much about pangolins, and my goodness, are they interesting creatures. I will say that this documentary is not nearly as touching as My Octopus Teacher. I don't think the storytelling is quite as amazing as that movie was, but that movie set a really high bar. Kulu's Journey is still fantastic and just loaded with interesting facts about an animal that is just completely unique. Even though they resemble armadillos, there's really nothing else like a pangolin, and the journey to get one sort of trained to be put back out in the wild is way more intense than you would expect. Now, I've got a couple of more family-friendly recommendations that were just very recently added to Netflix. Before that, though, we've got another major theatrical, dramatic release that I only just watched recently and was pleasantly surprised by Saturday night. Now, if you haven't heard of this flick, it's the story of the first airing of Saturday Night Live, or more specifically, the hour and a half leading up to their first show and all of the craziness that was going on behind the scenes. This movie features an absolutely incredible cast of young, up-and-coming actors. There are so many faces in this movie that I've seen in other really great roles, literally too many to mention. Well, I did think some of the depictions of some of the famous cast members was a bit regrettable, and the movie does kind of drag at points for the most part. This movie's got the electric, kind of chaotic feel of something like Birdman, where the camera is constantly moving, almost with no cuts. Now, there are a lot of cuts in this movie, but it does have that feel. You know, this movie is flawed. Like, there are way too many characters but that kind of just comes with the territory of the story, but there's just too many characters to really latch on. As soon as you get to liking someone, you're moving on to the next thing. But for the most part, I would strongly recommend this to anyone who's ever been a fan of Saturday Night Live. I think especially if you were a fan of the original show, maybe you're a bit older than me, you should check this out. It really is kind of an incredible depiction of their first airing. But even if you weren't alive then, if you have your generation of SNL that you really enjoy, the movie is still well worth watching. Now, if the Pangolin movie is not sweethearted enough for you, I've got a heartwarming, soul-squeezing movie next up, and I'm honestly surprised how much I enjoyed Nonnas. Now, this is the latest film from Vince Vaughn. He starred in it, but he's also the executive producer, and even though I've been loving everything he's been doing lately, I was still surprised how much I enjoyed this warm-hearted, PG-rated movie for adults. That's just not something we really get very often anymore. Good ones anyway. And Nonnas is just excellent. It's also based on a beautiful true story. Vince Vaughn plays a man who, after his mother dies, his Italian mother, he decides to open up a restaurant, and instead of hiring chefs, he hires local Italian grandmothers, other Nonnas, to come in and work in the kitchen to make the recipes that were passed down to them for generations. There are multiple storylines that come full circle in Nonnas in ways that I just was not expecting as well. You've also got Lorraine Bracco from Goodfellas. She's barely recognizable in the movie, but she plays a great Italian grandmother. And then Talia Shire, Adrian from the Rocky movies, she's incredible. She doesn't have many lines in this movie, but she plays these vulnerable characters so incredibly well. She's got some exquisite scenes in this movie, and that's not really a word I use often to describe movies here on the channel, but it applies to Nonnas. Now, I'll be quick with my family recommendations here, but they just added, and I mean today, the day I'm adding this video, they just added The Wild Robot, which was, I think, my favorite animated family movie to release in 2024. Just an incredible, heartfelt story that is about parenting in a way that I haven't seen in another animated film, and the animation style is just absolutely beautiful in this movie. I mean, from scene to scene, it's just an incredible movie. I've seen it a couple of times with my kids. I guarantee we'll be watching it again. We also just recently watched Paddington in Peru. I have loved the Paddington movies with my kids. Honestly, Paddington 2 is well worth watching on your own. If you've seen The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, you know what I'm talking about. Paddington in Peru, the third one, not quite as good as Paddington 2, but still just a really well-rounded and entertaining family movie that's entertaining for kids that are 3 years old all the way up to adults that are 70, 80 years old. It's got surprisingly broad appeal. Now, we'll jump from the family-friendly stuff to a brutal action movie. You know that's kind of my jam here on this channel. And even though I was a little bit disappointed with Tom Hardy's Havoc, I still ranked it pretty damn high on this list. Now, I will say, I went into this movie being a massive, massive fan of director Gareth Evans. He is most famous for writing and directing The Raid Redemption and The Raid 2. Two of the best modern-day martial arts movies I've ever seen. He also created a series, Gangs of London, which is also exceptional, and Havoc is a little different. So right off, I know some people were disappointed with the car chases in this movie. Similar to the Indian flick Fighter, they're all done with CGI. Now, this is something I would typically be pretty opposed to, but the technology is evolving, and in the hands of Gareth Evans, the opening car chase sequence, I thought, was incredible in Havoc. Now, it kind of looks and feels like a video game, but he keeps it moving, it's fast, it's frenetic, it kind of distracts you from the CGI elements, and there's zero chance they could have pulled off a stunt sequence like that in a movie like this with a budget like this. I mean, the opening car chase would have cost like the amount of the full budget of this movie. And Gareth Evans knows how to direct a car chase. The one in The Raid 2 is one of the best created this century. I still prefer The Real Thing. That's what you get with the Last Bullet series, is real car chases, and they are superior, but I'm strongly defending the one here in Havoc because I think we're going to see more like that in more movies as the technology advances, and my hope is that they turn out as good as the one in Havoc. Now, all of the fighting in this movie is brutal and does not use much CGI. Maybe for some of the blood. Tom Hardy wrecks some dudes in this movie, and you need to know that going in. The fight sequences in Havoc, and really all of Gareth Evans' work, are relentless. Just like John Wick, they will exhaust you, but he somehow makes them more brutal than John Wick movies. If you're a fan of the genre, I highly recommend Havoc. Just go into it expecting something a little bit different, and I'll even admit, Havoc prioritizes carnage over storytelling, but in this case, in the hands of Gareth Evans, I did not mind. If you remember at the top of the video, I mentioned a Mexican version of Tears of the Sun. And that's what you get with Counterattack, a very recently released Netflix original from Mexico. In fact, while I was watching it, I realized I don't know that I've ever really seen action movies from Mexico. Yes, there are plenty filmed in Mexico or that take place in Mexico, but this is a full-on Mexican production with the cast, crew, everything, and it's a killer action flick. It revolves around some special forces guy facing off with the cartel, and the story is fairly small. In fact, it feels like it's over with a bit too quickly. That's how much I enjoyed this movie, but it doesn't ever get overly complicated. Features a bunch of great shootouts. I will say the gunplay is a little bit lacking in this movie, like the way that they're holding the guns. If you're very technical about weaponry, you may find this movie to be a bit too distracting. Again, they're holding the guns a little looser than they maybe should be, just a little bit. It's a nitpick, but I know some people have a problem with that. I found everything else in Counterattack to be so engaging, I really did not mind. But for an action movie like this, the story gets in and out quickly. It's an enjoyable watch. And yes, it is brutal, but not nearly as brutal as a movie like Havoc, making Counterattack more accessible. I'll say on this one, the dubbing was fantastic. You can definitely watch and enjoy this movie dubbed, but if you speak Spanish, this is a great action flick to watch. And then on this show, it's Flick Connection. I really rarely talk about series, and it's only because I don't have time to watch them. I watch so many movies. Dedicating 10 hours to a series, or 10 hours or more, is difficult. I do it on occasion, but one of my favorite Netflix original series just returned this month for Volume 4, Love, Death, and Robots. Now, I've already watched all of the short films in Volume 4. I really enjoyed this new season. I think I enjoyed every single short that came out in Volume 4, where that's not been the case with previous volumes. Now, looking back, I will say I think Volume 3 has some of the strongest ones out of the entire series, but Volume 4, more of them were funny than they usually are. There's a couple of intense ones in Volume 4, but I gotta say, I think the other large thing was really funny and interesting. The screaming of the Tyrannosaur was just visually breathtaking and features a futuristic Mr. Beast, which was interesting. But How Zeke Got Religion features an incredible animation style. You're in a B-52 bomber, there's a demon on the wing. It is just one of my favorites out of the entire series. And it's a great way to access these short films that typically have a sci-fi plot. A lot of them have some sexually explicit elements. I mean, Screaming of the Tyrannosaur, you got a bunch of naked people riding on dinosaurs in outer space. And if there's nothing sexual, then they tend to be pretty bloody as well, but always a wild ride. If you like my recommendations here, start off with Season 1. I cannot recommend this show enough. In fact, maybe I should have made it number 1 on the list, but next up we've got a World War II spy movie that is kind of dry and a bit slow, but I still put it at number 1 because of how exceptional I thought number 24 was. Now, this movie is from Norway, so you gotta go with subtitles or dubbing, and it's about one of their most famous war heroes. He actually began resisting the Nazis on the day of their invasion and ultimately became like the leader of the Oslo gang, which carried out a bunch of acts of sabotage. And that's what you get in this movie, is their sabotage operations, but also kind of this big story arc of how he went from just like a regular guy to the leader of this group of organized spies. And what I really enjoyed about this movie is it never goes over the top. It never really tries to entertain you with the story. In fact, it feels fairly restrained, which is totally appropriate for this story. Like, his life was like one of restraint constantly. And it comes through in the movie. It feels very authentic. The spycraft all feels genuine. Never feels like James Bond kind of silly stuff. I mean, honestly, Netflix has some amazing World War II flicks. This has been one of my favorites over just the past few years, and it's only been around for like 6 months. But here's a quick recap of the list. If you feel like you found something to watch and you enjoyed this video, definitely click the like button. It does help the channel out. So does subscribing. In fact, not subscribing really reduces the chance you'll ever see my recommendations again. Speaking of YouTube, if you want to check out some free movies that are available right here on YouTube for a limited time, you might want to check this video out. It's the last one I uploaded. Thanks again to Beam for sponsoring this video. Don't forget to check out their link down in the description. But I'll keep making these videos as long as y'all keep watching them. Thanks for checking out this new release Netflix video, and you will see me on the next one.